Once upon a time. Is that good?
Yeah.
It's kind of crappy sound, isn't it?
Well, a little more bass.
All right. Try again. Is that okay? That's all right. Yeah. All right. Jolly good. Okay. Well, hey. First things first. I was going through the cupboards before we left the house, and I've been feeling like a bit of an arsehole lately, and I found this in the cupboard. So I just thought I'd get rid of that straight away. Because we don't need to feel like arseholes. Although I do feel like an arsehole right now. I guess that's the whole point, isn't it? Barilla.
He's making a mess. We're a nice neighborhood little tavern here.
Right, I'm going to have to buy more pasta
Uh-oh. The Yorkshire kicks in every time. That's a wasted bastard. So, you've probably heard of all this book, Marmite Cowboy. It was originally going to be called Hermaphrodite Cowboy. For various reasons, I've changed my mind on that. This is the unabridged version. In other words, I didn't change the names of the people in this, but none of them I don't think are here today, so it won't be a problem. If they were, it could be lawsuits, I suppose. So you get the raw deal here. I'm going to start at the beginning. That seems like a logical place to start. Just a little bit at the beginning to give you a taste of where it starts, those that haven't. Has anyone read this yet? Anybody? Okay. During the wee hours of Maundy Thursday, 1957, in a stone cottage in the shadow of our Gothic church, my mum and a squirmy little me, awash in amniotic fluid and blood, were manhandled through the birthing process by the drunken village doctor. In this endeavour, he was assisted by the district nurse, a no-nonsense northern woman of steady hand, one of a multitude of matriarchs who, together with my mum, made me what I still am today, a Tidser lad. Tidser, short for Tideswell, the biggest village or smallest town in Derbyshire, sits in a green basin atop a limestone plateau, snaked with valleys and streams. The rocky hills, lush fields and spongy moorlands carry on till the soot-blackened red brick of Manchester in the west and Sheffield in the east. Upon approach, we feel our way through the Pennine fog infused with coal fire smoke, the odours of sheep shit, cow shit, the fumes of fish and chips. We emerge into a central artery of pubs, newsagents, butchers and sweet shops. Out of the thick, cold air comes the clang of an anvil. In fields where sheep complain and cows shudder, all manner of creatures ruminate and eliminate, hence the pond. Even among Englishmen, the northernmost reaches of Derbyshire have inspired trepidation. In a tour through the whole island of Great Britain, published in 1724 by the dissenter Daniel Defoe, Derbyshire's high peaks are described as a howling wilderness inhabited by fearsome troglodytes. I guess he was a big fan of the Peak District Tourist Board. When I read that, my heart brims, but I'm also reminded of the reasons why I've always dreamt of going some other place. Yes, I was the dreamer in an otherwise well-grounded working-class family, snug in our solid stone cottage, tucked into our compact town. When growing up, I dreamed of going to America, a land of Oz imagined from legends, swapped with my best friend Nidge, from TV shows, movies, comic books, even from Camel cigarette soft packs. An odd association, but one that I will explain before long. I was not born with an innate wish to escape Tideswell. On the contrary, I so loved the liberties of my childhood that were it not for school and other traumas, I might never have left at all. I could not help but love a place that offered so much mad adventure, so many gruesome venues for play, which is why I wish to take you there, though I must guard you as we go. Have a seat on the churchyard wall, as good a place as any to observe our local species. The village lasses sit here to smoke fags and gossip just like their mothers and grandmothers. The current crop wears miniskirts, overdone makeup, industrial strength mascara, or was that the look their mothers affected? In a socio-economic brigadoon such as this, styles once thought fashionable never fully disappear. Creatures thought extinct continue to graze and irrigate. And you know, that's one of the things I've often noticed when I go back. I see I still see old ladies wandering around my village with the hair nets, the plastic things on their head, you know, the same raincoats that they were wearing 40 odd years ago. And I think to myself, where did they find this stuff? How come they haven't changed? Why do they still look the same as they did when I was 15 years old? And then I also realise, disturbingly, that when I was 15 years old, these same ladies were wearing fishnet stockings, miniskirts, smoking fags and asking me if I wanted to go behind the bush shelter with them. It's like, time stands still in a socio-economic rigadoon. So, that's the beginning. It moves on from there. I didn't plan this.
Oh, what a surprise.
Surprise, huh? So, this is my title, indeed my England, which is why I offer myself as your guide to the green and septic isle. I also offer my gentle protection, for you see, England has always been hostile to the uninvited. Each invasion from the Iberians and Celts through to the campaigns of the Romans, Angles, Vikings, Saxons and Normans has contributed to the scrappy little mongrel our island is. Kick it at your own risk. Tizewell has been known to strike back. Most who have lived there can attest to the bracing effect of a kick in the balls or punch in the face. At the northern end is Town Head, a cluster of windswept cottages and farms. I spent a lot of time up Town Head, where my best friend Nidge lived with his parents, a pair of beatnik teachers, in a modern bungalow built in the corner of a field belonging to Nidge's granddad. The bungalow was right across from the Town Head recreation ground, with its collection of Industrial Revolution-inspired playthings. The most remarkable was the swing boat, a huge iron and wood bench suspended by 4 long, heavy iron poles from an axle atop 2 sturdy iron tripods. They didn't think about child safety back in those days, really. It swung with the force of a battering ram, especially when loaded up with 18 or 20 kids. Cast iron seats protruded dangerously from each end, and the figurehead that often adorned these seats was a howling, big-eared, brill-creamed, short-back and sided, snot-bubbling, age-appropriately ugly village boy. I was often one of them, hanging on for dear life. It was quite a sight, like human flypaper, festooned with boys and a few sturdy girls, a pendulum of pleasure and pain, imagined by its crew to be a Viking longship, a British man-of-war, or even a spaceship. A cause of missing teeth, torn limbs, and in my case, a TKO. I was 4 or 5 years old at the time, and I ran excitedly towards it, rushing ahead of my best friend Nidge, when an end seat clobbered me full force in the middle of my forehead. I sometimes wonder if the impact altered my consciousness. Had my brains been scrambled? If so, might that explain upon shortly thereafter meeting Nidge's Uncle Doug, the explosion of my lifelong passion for all things American. The huge egg-shaped lump on my forehead was still fading through shades of blue-green when Doug visited from America. I was fascinated by this uncle from Ohio, with his exotic Camel cigarette packets, his toffee-coloured skin. I was jealous that I didn't have an uncle who lived in America. He was tall and loud like John Wayne, but unlike John Wayne, he used the word shit a lot. Although he was English, he didn't look it, sound it, or act it. He'd been in North America since World War II, after surviving the sinking of British aircraft carrier HMS Royal in the Atlantic in 1941, and having flown Spitfires in the Battle of Britain a year earlier. He'd been sent to Canada to train Royal Canadian Air Force pilots how to handle the solid little fighter planes that had defended Britain, even when outnumbered 3 to 1 by the Luftwaffe. Doug married a girl from Detroit. They ended up living on an island in the middle of Lake Erie, where Doug flew an old Ford tri-motor passenger cargo plane until he was caught at the controls with a bottle of Jack Daniels. He seemed larger than life, and I was captivated by his brightly coloured plaid shirts and his khaki trousers, which he called pants. They were so different from the dark, heavy clothes my dad and all the other blokes in my village wore. He seemed straight out of a TV show. I kept saying, I don't want to go see those guys. Why want to go? He said, no, they're really good live, they're really good live. Anyway, he kept saying, you know, come on, I'll pay for the petrol. He was a year older than me, he had a car. I'll pay for the petrol. Yeah, I'll pay to get in. Yeah, I'll buy you beer all night. I know some girls down there. All right, so I went. Anyone familiar with the Specials? The band The Specials? Concrete Jungle? Very true depiction of the city of Coventry, Concrete Jungle. The violent, it's a city only known for violence, really. That's about its major export. So, when I kind of put that in the back of my mind and went with him to Coventry. The club was another doorway set in prison concrete. A tuxedoed thug sentry, his crisp white shirt bathed in a pink glow at the entrance. I don't remember the name of the club except that it was a typical 1970s disco bar with a lot of red everywhere. Carpets, walls, lights, the whole fucking place was on red alert. By contrast, the music venue was dark and bare, little more than a large concrete box with a low stage. Soon we were being pushed along by a few hundred people towards the stage. I contemplated the scrambling demographic of the Doctor Who fan base. Disco dollies, progressive rock types, older singles, and right behind us, a pack of feral skinheads, bony hard and tattooed, twitchy with aggression, the verbal abuse sparking off them like static charges. I found it hard to believe that a group of long-haired American proto-slackers singing slide guitar-driven parables of forlorn love could appeal to these predators of Coventry's concrete jungle. The band took the stage. The lead singer pranced about in denim and buckskin, his eyes wild and wide. As they began playing their country pop ballads, the drizzle of an English night gave way to my fantasy of balmy southwestern roadhouses. I could almost smell the mesquite in the desert, sensations I'd absorbed into my fanciful land of Oz, the river of highway, the gorgeous hitchhiking blondes, all of it conjured California. Angela Davis, Robert Crumb, strange bedfellows. Ian suddenly lurched about in spastic movements, reminiscent of his flat-foot dancing style. I turned to look at him in the crush, fearful that he was having a seizure. The permanent surprise on Ian's face had heightened to something more disturbing. An oversized Dr. Martin's boot was being repeatedly stuffed into Ian's sizable posterior. The boot was attached to the stomping end of a feral skinhead's leg, a huge 18-eyelet cherry red wake-up call. The bother boy spat and snarled. Ian was to be sacrificed to the deity of urban misery. Outside, after the show. My American land of Oz came crashing down like the Hollywood sign in a movie earthquake. Sunsets and smiling blondes vanished like advert images on highway billboards swept away by tornado. I stared into the spotty face of Middle England's rage and anger. 6 of the buggers with shaved heads, amphetamine eyes. They wore the urban uniform of the disenfranchised. Cherry red Dr. Martens, Ben Sherman shirts and bleach-stained Levi's. They gobbed phlegm, promised to kick our fucking teeth in. The music shriveled as I took stock. 60-odd miles from home, no friends, no allies, in a city familiar only by its reputation for violence. The skins were sticking the boot in, even though we were in plain view in the peripheral glow of the stage. The lead singer bleated his impassioned, soft-born rock. When your body's had enough of me and I'm laying right out on the floor. When you think I've loved you all I can, I'm gonna love you a little bit more. Jesus, what shite. Why the fuck did I come here? I kept saying to myself, what the fucking hell am I doing here? It was all so pointless. I was going to be beaten bloody. And for what? It didn't register at first that the bass player was trying to communicate. I was so shocked and locked into the scene on stage just to maintain my composure that I missed his first signals. Then I realized that he was mouthing, "Are you in trouble?" I nodded as a kick in my arse propelled me towards the stage. The bass player gave me a reassuring look. Where is he? Before ducking out behind the side-fill speakers. He was talking to someone, I had no idea who. He took his place on the stage again and gave me a wink. Now the skinheads began to grab us from the back. Ian and I turned to make a stand. Just then, Ian and I were shoved aside. A pair of Hell's Angels, vast and hairy, decked out in the Oakland, California chapter regalia, bellied up, pausing to ask, "Are these the guys that are bothering you?" These giants took action as soon as I nodded. They walked straight into the skinheads, who had ceased snarling, and gnashing, gobsmacked as we were. The angels gathered up the bug-eyed crew and strong-armed the whole bobbing, scrambling lot of them to the back of the room and out the door. Ian and I turned back to the stage where the singer delivered the last line. When you think you've had enough, or whatever the hell it is, I'm gonna love you a little bit more. The bass player winked again, and the band kicked into a juke joint stomper. We were back in the roadhouse, and I could feel the big diesel trucks rolling in to the American night. Standing at the departure gate with my mum and dad, 19 years old, right? I wondered why they had stopped trying to talk their 19-year-old son out of boarding the plane to New York City. They'd put up a real fight at first. I told them that I was going to quit art college. From an acquaintance I had heard about a Norwegian factory ship in the North Sea, where huge sums of money could be earned. And since you're out at sea, you couldn't really spend any of it. When I announced to my parents that this was my latest plan, a worried look drew across their faces. For a short while, they appealed for me to think about it or just buckle down at college and try to do the best I could. After all, wasn't I doing what I'd always wanted to do? Suddenly, my dad cottoned to my deafness on the subject. He recognized the profundity of my restlessness and proceeded to give me one of the best bits of advice at precisely the right moment. Bloody hell, lad! Have you got no bloody brains? What is it? You're going to give up something that you've always wanted to do? You get a full grant from the government. You're getting paid to go to college. What exactly do you want? Yeah, I know, Dad, but I'm bored. I don't really like it. You're bloody bored? How bloody boring? Do you think it'll be on a bloody Norwegian factory bloody ship? Last thing I know, you don't speak any bloody Norwegian. I told them there were loads of British blokes that worked on as well. Ah, and what kind of bloody blokes do you think they'll be? I'll tell you, some right rough buggers, that's who. You'd not last 5 minutes out there, freezing your arse off, covered in fish guts, surrounded by bloody Norwegians. You're half asleep, lad. That was a common refrain from me, that. You're half asleep, lad. You're in a bloody daydream. You're in a bloody dream world. Wake up, you daft bugger. He advised me to inquire whether I could put my grant on hold for a year, take a year off and do something different, and then go back and see how I felt about it. I'm going to move on here. So that's what happened. They taught me out of it. Now here I am. I'm waiting for the flight at Manchester Airport. Nobody's stopping me. Not my parents, not myself, and not the airport staff as I made my way to the boarding desk. No one advised me to turn back. No one said, forget it, lad. You're not ready for this. Go home with your mum and dad. Not to mention what my mates back in the village pub had said. By God, it's a long way to go just to get mugged, isn't it? What the fuck do you... Oh, that's what you said. What the fuck do you want to go there for? You're all fucking crazy there. Talking about you, Americans. The same people in my pub, the troglodytes, are telling me that you guys are all crazy. I told them about Doug, Midge's uncle in Ohio, the one who lived on an island in Lake Erie, who'd become a plumber since his forced retirement from aviation. He said I could work for him, make big American bucks under the table so that I could travel from one end of the country to the other. I told the local lads about my free association dreams of America, but my enthusiasm for my subject only earned the scoffing of young men who would never dream of leaving Tidser. The evening before I left home, tucked into the sitting room couch between mum and dad, I watched Kojak, whose New York City was a rat's nest of gun-toting pimps, psycho muggers and lollipop-sucking Greek-American detectives. Over the previous month or so, such lurid visions of America had spurred my mum into action. First, she'd contacted an Episcopalian minister who'd served as a curate at our village church in the 1960s, back when I'd been a choir boy. She got his address from an old neighbour lady who'd kept up correspondence, sending him parish news. My mum asked the former curate if he'd agreed to be a contact if I were to get into trouble. This is all about me mum trying to, keep you safe, which is what mums are for, right? She couldn't do this about the plane, though. The DC-9 almost never landed at JFK. As we approached the USA, we ran into a nor'easter. The seatbelt signs came on and stayed on as the plane bumped and shook. I drank a lot of British Airways red wine. Then the captain explained that we might be rerouted to Montreal, which pissed me off to no end. Montreal? What the fuck? I hadn't come through everything. I'd gone through arguing with mum and dad, begging the county council to put my college grant on hold, working at a chemical mixing job at a local lead mine, and spending all this bloody money just to end up in fucking Canada, the least romantic country of the New World. Montreal of all places. Weren't they French or something? If I wanted to steep myself in frog talk, I would have taken the hovercraft from Calais and then the bus to Paris. The DC-9 made repeated passes over JFK, then began its descent. The pilot had considered the prospect of a night in Montreal, but chose to risk death instead. The visibility through my window was zero, as empty as white noise, until the plane with a lurch dipped down through the clouds, revealing my first glimpse of America. Cars crept along a grey and white strip along Island Expressway. Like the picture on an old black and white TV with poor reception, the American scene appeared blurry and straight for the static. I squinted through the blizzard at the crawling movie set cars. I was fairly certain that all the people in all those cars carried guns and wished to enact their appetites upon young visitors such as myself. From the gangsters of Superfly to the hillbillies of Deliverance, with the art porn of Andy Warhol's factory tossed in, my mind teemed with the sights and sounds of gunplay and sodomy. Perhaps Montreal wouldn't be so bad. My sister Judith is the oldest, and we're probably most similar. We struggled in school, we like to talk, and we're not afraid to engage with total strangers. Gets us in a lot of trouble. She's a real fighter, who, though short and curvy, is agile in pursuit of her desires and quick to defend her liberty. One time when I was young, I saw her bound downstairs ready to go to a dance. She wore a dress that looked like something Martha Reeves and the Vandellas would have gone out on stage in. Tight on the hips with ruffles above the hem. The dress transformed my annoying bossy sister into a rocking, rolling femme fatale, her hair backcombed in a kind of beehive style, her face transformed by heavy eyeshadow, false eyelashes and bright lipstick. How glamorous she looked, how much like someone on top of the pops. If my dad admired her, he didn't let it show. Get back up them bloody stairs, he said, you're not going anywhere like that. Her plan was to be picked up by an older boy in his Vauxhall Viva. It was a rare thing for someone of his age to own a car. Local lads borrowed one instead. That's a reference to Steve. The boy's name only added to the uneasiness my dad may have felt. This is his actual name. Brian Tongue. Came from Bradwell, a village 5 miles away. Definitely a different tribe. Aye, were my daughter in danger of becoming Mrs. Tongue and removing herself to the Valley of the Tongues, I expect that I would have objected as well. My sister and dad argued and shouted as he chased her around the kitchen and up the stairs where she locked herself in the bathroom. As my dad settled down and stopped shouting, Judith climbed out of the bathroom window, onto the tin roof of our outhouse, down into the backyard, and off up the street to the waiting Vauxhall Viva. Or the Tongue-mobile, as my brother Martin dubbed it. This was one of many instances when Judith spurned all attempts at control. Eventually, when she was 17, she moved out to live in halls of residence as a trainee nurse, far from the interference of a well-meaning but confounded father. I've always admired her spunk. My dad was a tricky bloke to grow up with, because he, as you can tell from that, he was all about trying to control the children, which was not very easy. And, well, I used to work with him occasionally. He was a stonemason. I was crap at it. He didn't really want me to work with him, but he had to give me money anyway sometimes, so he might as well have me mix some cement or whatever, I was kind of crap. As a boy, I sometimes worked with him on weekends and school holidays, but it was never a good fit. My brother Martin worked well with Dad and they became partners for a while. Martin's career path had narrowed after a few youthful missteps. Being asked to leave school didn't help. Failing a breathalyzer test cost him his license. One day before morning tea break, when I was working with them both, my dad said to me, "Bloody hell, lad, if I were any bugger else, I'd have fired you 10 times already today." That was the kind of inspiration he gave me. We were up on the moors, building a cowshed in the wind and rain. You can imagine I really enjoyed being up there doing that. It was like, thanks Dad for letting me join you up here. My dad had been nagging me all morning about my attitude towards work. We stopped for a mug of tea and some yellow cake my mum used to make, and his grumbling increased. Bloody hell, lad, you're near bloody useless up here. I don't bloody know what to do with you, blah, blah, blah. He started quizzing me about my future plans. I tried to enjoy my mum's delicious yellow cake, but he just kept going on. What do you want out of life, lad? I washed down my cake with the tea and answered, I want my life to be one long orgasm. His eyes ballooned. My brother showered us both with yellow cake. That's enough of that. I'll have to read the book. I'd been warned of this prospect by the other 19-year-olds I was hanging out with. A group of lads that included the son of the local vicar. Not willing to take their word for it. The royal laws. No, piss off, can't come in. Okay, a problem for which these Maryland boys had their own answer. A station wagon, a case of beer, and a bottle of cheap vodka. Following this session of secret drinking in the swampy woods outside town, we proceeded to drive around the area, drunk off our asses, visiting the neighbouring town of Easton, where we encountered other small groups of intoxicated teens hanging out with their cars in supermarket parking lots. I couldn't help but wonder at this society's bizarre attitudes and values. I didn't like the racism class thing, but I understood how it worked. The drinking situation was completely beyond my comprehension. You weren't supposed to drink until you were 21. There was no flexibility in the culture other than to presumably turn a blind eye while youths of the village procured alcohol and took off in their cars to drink in seclusion away from experienced elders. I found myself wondering, A, whether the elders were too stupid to know what was going on, B, didn't care what was going on, or C, were in total denial of what was going on. So, my first trip across after I left the East Coast, I'm on the Greyhound bus. I awoke before sunrise near Las Cruces, New Mexico. It was there that I saw my first sunrise in the desert. I straightened up in my seat and rubbed my eyes. Through the window I saw a hint of what I'd pretended to see from bus rides in England. At first, it was a mysterious black silhouette of rugged mountain peaks, backlit by a brightening indigo sky dotted with huge bright stars. It looked hyper-real, like a diorama of what a desert was supposed to look like at dawn. The sky grew lighter and the mountains were edged by an aureole the colour of ripe blood orange, fading yellow as it bled into a firmament of sea green and blue. Before long, the raging fireball of the sun took control of the cloudless azure sky and all that lay beneath it. My first glimpse of the desert. In Phoenix, I called Randy, a dope-smoking vicar from Vegas. Randy didn't answer, so I left a message that I'd call again when I got to Las Vegas. On the bus, I met a bloke called Ray. He was in his late 50s. Back then, 50s was like being a 70-plus-year-old today. He had dyed black hair combed across his balding head, trying unsuccessfully to mimic a pompadour. He wore a tan polyester leisure suit and shiny plastic shoes of the same colour. The pattern on his lucky shirt was concentric orange, cream and brown circles. It looked like the wallpaper in some of my friends' parents' council houses. I pegged him as a New World strain of the genus Northern British Elvisus wannabeasus. I didn't mention them earlier. My village had herds of Northern Elvisus, British wannabeasus, and Tom Joneses as well. They were everywhere. You know, shirts undone down to here, hairy chest, gold chain. Kind of like Bob. Bob, by the way, there's another bit of luck. But met Bob one night accidentally with the Big Bad Bollocks, which was 2 guys back then. It's amazing, these things happen. You meet people, before you know it, you know, like you're stuck with them. Bakewell during the summer was too expensive and rentals too scarce. So we moved to Sheffield, where I got a job bartending at an American theme bar. See the theme? The theme continues. At an American theme bar, formerly a neighbourhood pub called the Prince of Wales. The owners, Allied Breweries Limited, spent a fortune opening a chain of American bars across the country. The Woodstock Diner, as they call it, was located on the edge of the well-heeled Eccleshall neighbourhood of Sheffield. The owners regarded it as their flagship of their chain. It did provide a trendy hangout for Sheffield's homegrown celebrities, such as the 80s pop band The Human League, and 1 or 2 boxers and pro golfers. We also got visits from curiosity seekers, either interested in its quasi-famous patrons or just intrigued by the hype that it was a revolutionary concept in drinking and dining for Northern England. In actuality, it was an exercise in how to miss the target, a disaster in corporate planning. A few dickheads would come in dressed like Miami Vice's Crockett and Tubbs and ask for a beer, as in, give me a beer, or I'll have a beer. You have to understand, in England, especially up north, you have two very specific reasons for going into a pub. The crack, the good times, and a pint. A pint is not some generic fluid sucked down your gullet at a temperature too cold to have flavour. It's a cask-conditioned, gravity-pulled pint of best bitter. In the city of Sheffield, you have the big three to choose from: Stones, Wards and Tetleys, as well as regional pints such as Barnsley Bitter or Thixtons. And a drinker always knew exactly which one he thirsted for. I'm sure even Americans at that time would have been amused by the pricey selection of Budweiser, Pabst Blue Ribbon and Schlitz cans at the Woodstock Diner. In a proper northern pub, it was never, I'll have a beer, but always, pint of Tetley's, love, or whichever was your choice, asked for by name. England was changing with wine bars and their ilk, but not so quickly or so much that Sheffield could be mistaken for Miami. It was at this time that I received a call from my tiny slice of America, my other home. Beverly and I were visiting my mum and dad for a couple of days. It was always nice to get out of our shitty flat. Carol Hyde, my real estate entrepreneur friend, was calling to see if I was interested in coming over and helping her. Listen, I'm calling because I want to see if you would like to come back over and help me with your idea that we talked about. I didn't have a fucking clue what she was on about, but I sensed something interesting, an opportunity. So I played along, not wishing to scuttle anything that was brewing around my idea. What eventually revealed in our conversation was that I had mouthed off drunkenly one night that I thought her recent acquisition of an old railroad company convention hall would make a great nightclub, rather than being subdivided into office condominiums. She hadn't made up her mind about the nightclub yet. She was checking to see my level of interest, and I said that I was very interested indeed. I talked with Beverly about it, and I won her over to giving it a try. This meant we had to get married so she could get a green card. We needed to do it quickly too, because even though it would be a while before we moved across the pond, the green card process would take months. It was the beginning of May, and the woman at the front desk of the registry office in Sheffield told me there was nothing available till October. Sorry, me duck, spring and summer are booked solid. We don't have a gap till October, you're going to have to wait till then, love. No matter how I protested, she said there was nothing she could do. But in the end, well, there is one date available, but you'll not want it. You'll not want it. What date? What is it? I'll take it, whatever it is. When is it? Well, it's just over a week from now, love. On the 13th. Friday the 13th, you see. We'll take it, I shouted, like someone who'd just secured a bargain at an auction. A week later, we sat supping pints of Stone's best bitter in the Roebuck Arms, across the street from the registry. With us were my older brother Martin, his girlfriend Barbara, and a new friend of mine from the diner, Amy from New York, daughter of jazz musician Mose Allison. She was in Sheffield with her English husband. We all had a buzz on by the time we entered the registry, so much so that the official stopped the ceremony because we weren't taking it seriously enough. To which Beverly responded, "What's your problem? What's your problem? We're just having fun. This isn't religious, is it?" Well, no. "Well, then get on with it," she said, using the voice I know well. That one that brooks no opposition, invites no discussion. It's the happiest day of our lives, isn't it? The clerk got us out of there as quickly as he legally could. My brother Martin took a few photos, during which I mooned the camera. As we headed to the central bus station to go home, I noticed Friday the 13th Part 3 in 3D at a nearby cinema. So I herded everyone inside and declared it the wedding reception. After the movie, we stopped at the Cross Sides up on the moors at the Derbyshire edge of Sheffield, where my mum and dad joined us for a toast. I can't remember much about our wedding night, and neither can Beverly. We've agreed it was magnificent. And so there you go. I was lured back to that funky old building that is, again, a funky old building, Pearl Street nightclub. And I got to live out, finally, those early teen fantasies that I developed at the youth club in Tideswell, dancing on a Friday night to the SOS Disco, Sound of Soul. I think it was Brian Tong's brother that ran it, because he was from Bradley. We'd all be out there dancing to our Motown and our stacks and everything. And lo and behold, what, 10 years later, no, a bit more, 12 years later or so, I'm hanging out at Pearl Street nightclub talking to James Brown and Wilson Pickett and Martha Reeves and the Marvelettes, and I'm like, oh God. So that's all the next book. Because I do have some quite interesting tales to tell about behind the scenes interactions. A troglodyte from Derbyshire and various soul singers from Detroit and Point South. I think I've done, haven't I? That's enough. I think I'm getting pretty tired. Thank you for coming. And don't forget, tell everybody to buy this bloody book. $2.99. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Smashwords. It's out there, folks. Thanks again. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, bastard!